The confession came quietly, almost too quietly to be real. When Dylan admitted to causing the accident that killed Luna Nozawa, there was no trembling voice, no breakdown, no trace of remorse. Only a calm, rehearsed composure that made Will and Electra exchange wary glances. It was as if he had been waiting for the right moment to say it, as if guilt had never truly weighed on him. The Forrester family gathered around the news with mixed reactions: relief that someone had finally taken responsibility, and disbelief that Dylan, soft-spoken, polite, seemingly incapable of cruelty, could have been the one behind the wheel that night. Yet beneath the surface of grief and closure, something felt off. Steffy noticed it first. She had learned to read people through years of loss and manipulation, and Dylan's eyes carried not shame but calculation. When he spoke about Luna, there was a flicker of possessiveness, a strange intimacy, as if the tragedy had bound them together in a secret only he could understand. Finn tried to rationalize it. As a doctor, he trusted evidence over instinct, and every report confirmed Luna's death. Her car found twisted beyond recognition on a coastal highway, her belongings scattered in the rain. But Will and Electra, who had been closest to her, refused to let go. Something in the official narrative didn't add up. No autopsy photos had ever been released, the coroner's report was vague, and the crash site itself seemed curiously clean, almost staged. The more they dug, the more inconsistencies they found. Luna's phone had gone offline hours before the alleged crash, and the last text she sent, to Dylan, simply read, "I know what you did." At first, they thought she meant emotional betrayal. Dylan had always been unpredictable, oscillating between tenderness and control, a man desperate to be seen as a savior while hiding his own darkness. But as they investigated deeper, Will found financial irregularities in Luna's accounts, large withdrawals made days before her disappearance, traced to shell corporations linked to a biomedical research company. When he showed the data to Finn, the doctor's expression changed from confusion to fear. The company in question had once funded an experimental project that Dylan was involved in, a study on neural restoration and trauma recovery. The project had been abruptly shut down after ethical violations were reported, and Luna had been one of its participants. The realization hit Steffy like ice. The accident hadn't been an accident at all, it was a cover-up. Luna had discovered something dangerous enough for Dylan to silence her. But as the group tried to piece together the motive, the story grew even darker. Dylan wasn't merely hiding guilt, he was hiding Luna herself. Far away, in a remote cabin deep in the mountains north of Big Bear, Luna stirred from a restless sleep. Her body was weak, her mind clouded by sedation. Beside her, an infant slept peacefully, its soft breathing a fragile rhythm that kept her tethered to reality. When she tried to move, pain rippled through her, and Dylan's voice emerged from the shadows. "Easy," he whispered, his tone gentle yet hollow. "You're safe now. They can't hurt you anymore." He always said they never I. In his fractured mind, Dylan had rewritten the truth. He believed that Luna's car crash had been fate's intervention, an opportunity for him to save her from a world that didn't deserve her brilliance. When the car went off the cliff, he had been there, not to rescue her, but to take her away. The baby she carried, the child that no one else knew existed, became his obsession, his justification. He convinced himself that Luna had been brainwashed by those around her, by the Forresters and the Spencers, and that only he could protect her from the corporate web that had exploited her in life. But protection, in Dylan's mind, was indistinguishable from possession. Over time, his care grew into confinement. Luna's protests were met with tranquilizers. Her confusion was treated as hysteria. He told her that the world believed she was dead, that no one was looking for her, that she should be grateful for the quiet life he was offering her and their family. Yet Luna's spirit, though fractured, was not broken. In secret moments when Dylan left for supplies, she began to gather evidence: a torn piece of map, a hidden recording, a note scrawled beneath the floorboards for whoever might one day find her. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Will and Electra continued their pursuit. Steffy's instincts told her to stay cautious, but Electra was relentless. She began tracing Dylan's old contacts, discovering that several of them had disappeared without explanation. One, a former lab technician, left behind a series of encrypted voice notes that Finn managed to decode. The recordings revealed horrifying details. The research Dylan had worked on involved not therapy, but memory manipulation. Subjects were injected with compounds designed to suppress or rewrite trauma, experiments that had been banned after multiple fatalities. Luna, it turned out, had been one of the whistleblowers who intended to expose the project. That was Dylan's motive. He hadn't killed her to silence guilt. He had hidden her to preserve his creation. In his delusion, Luna wasn't a victim. She was proof that his work could succeed. The crash was a ruse to erase her identity, allowing him to start over with her as his living experiment, and with the baby as the next generation of his design. Finn's medical expertise helped the team piece together the technical aspects, but emotionally, the case tore them apart. Will's sense of justice clashed with Steffy's need for caution. Electra's outrage pushed her into dangerous territory, contacting investigative journalists and former law enforcement to pressure Dylan's known associates. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became that Dylan had powerful allies who still believed in his work, figures from the pharmaceutical world and private investors who would rather see Luna remain dead than risk exposure. When the first confirmed sighting of Dylan surfaced, a gas station attendant's security footage showing him buying baby formula and medication, everything changed. The timestamp was recent. Finn recognized the mountains in the background. They were close. The group drove north under the pretense of a weekend trip, their nerves on edge. Will carried a weapon, though he'd never fired one. Electra packed a first aid kit. Steffy, though outwardly calm, carried a quiet rage that mirrored her father's old battles with betrayal and control. Finn, always the man of reason, feared that confrontation could turn lethal, but the moral line had already blurred. When they reached the cabin, night had fallen. A dim light flickered inside. Will moved first, cautious but determined. What they found inside was a nightmare suspended between love and madness. Luna, pale and thin, cradled a baby in her arms, her eyes wide with both recognition and disbelief. "You found me," she whispered, voice trembling. Behind her, Dylan stepped out of the shadows, holding a syringe. "You shouldn't have come," he said. The standoff unfolded in agonizing silence. Dylan's expression was one of heartbreak, not anger. "I saved her," he said softly. "She was gone, broken. They would have used her, twisted her again. I made her whole." But Will saw the truth, the delusion that had replaced Dylan's humanity. He wasn't protecting Luna. He had imprisoned her in a fantasy of redemption that existed only in his mind. As Dylan moved closer, Steffy stepped forward, her voice steady but cold. "You took her life. You took her choice. That isn't love, it's control." For a moment, Dylan's hand trembled, the syringe slipping slightly. In that hesitation, Luna reached out, clutching the baby protectively. "Please," she whispered, "let me go." Something in her voice shattered what remained of his control. Dylan dropped the syringe, his eyes filling with tears. "I didn't mean to lose you," he said. "I just wanted a second chance." But before anyone could move, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Finn had called for backup earlier, anticipating danger. Dylan froze, realizing the illusion was over. When the authorities arrived, they found him kneeling beside Luna, whispering apologies she no longer heard. He surrendered quietly, almost relieved. As he was led away, he turned to Will and said, "You'll see. She's better now. I fixed her." In the weeks that followed, the truth unraveled in fragments. Luna was taken to a secure medical facility where she began the long process of recovery. The baby, a girl, was confirmed to be healthy, though her paternity remained uncertain. Dylan's trial became a media circus, exposing the unethical experiments and the network of corruption that had funded them. Yet through all the revelations, one question lingered. Had Dylan truly believed he was saving Luna, or had he been driven by something darker, a god complex, an obsession with rewriting fate itself? For Will and Electra, the ordeal left invisible scars. Their pursuit of justice had cost them peace, and though Luna was alive, the woman they found was forever changed. Steffy and Finn, too, were haunted by what they had witnessed. The line between healing and control, between love and possession, now blurred beyond recognition. Months later, Luna stood by the window of her clinic, watching the sunrise over Los Angeles. Her daughter slept peacefully nearby. Freedom felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong breath. Dylan's words still echoed in her mind, but she no longer feared them. "You can't fix people," she whispered to the empty room. "You can only let them be." Somewhere, far away in a psychiatric ward, Dylan scribbled on a notepad, designing equations that made no sense to anyone but him. Above the drawings, one name was written over and over again: Luna. And beneath it, a single sentence: "I brought her back." No one knew if it was delusion or confession. Perhaps, in Dylan's fractured mind, he truly had brought her back, not to life, but into the haunting eternity of his obsession. For the rest of them, the nightmare would never fully end. Luna was alive, yes, but the part of her that once trusted the world was gone. And in that silence, amid the echoes of love twisted by madness, one truth remained undeniable. Some rescues cost more than death itself. That revelation shattered everything they thought they knew. The trial was still underway when the secret came to light, leaked through a DNA test that neither the prosecution nor the defense had intended to make public. Dylan, the man who had kidnapped Luna, manipulated her mind, and nearly destroyed an entire network of lives, was not merely her captor, he was her sibling. The blood test confirmed a truth buried for decades. Dylan and Luna shared the same mother, but their father was none other than Bill Spencer. The news detonated like a bomb across Los Angeles. Forrester Creations, Spencer Publications, and even the hospital where Finn worked became ground zero for gossip and scandal. Bill, blindsided and furious, denied it at first. But the evidence was irrefutable. Years ago, before his rise to power, he had been involved in a brief, secret relationship with a woman named Clara Nozawa, a name that had long vanished from his memory, buried under decades of business, ambition, and women. Clara, Luna's mother, had left Los Angeles before Luna was born, taking with her a past Bill never revisited. What no one knew was that she had already had a child, Dylan. When Bill received the confirmation, he locked himself in his office for hours. The walls that had witnessed his ruthless deals now echoed with the silence of disbelief. The man who had prided himself on control suddenly faced the one thing he could never negotiate: the consequences of his own past. He had fathered 2 children who had found each other not through family, but through tragedy, and his bloodline was now tangled in madness. For Luna, the revelation was unbearable. She was still recovering, her body frail, her mind scarred from months of captivity. The knowledge that Dylan was her half-brother turned every memory of his care into a nightmare she couldn't fully comprehend. His words, his twisted claims of love, protection, and salvation, now carried an even darker meaning. He hadn't kidnapped her out of romantic obsession, but out of a warped sense of familial preservation. In his mind, he hadn't stolen her life. He had saved her from the corruption of their father. In the sterile quiet of her recovery room, Luna confronted the fragments of her identity. Who was she, if her life had been built on lies? Her mother had kept Bill's name a secret, perhaps to shield her, or perhaps to shield herself. But in hiding the truth, Clara had condemned both of her children to walk in the shadows of that secret. Dylan had grown up in foster care, shuttled between institutions, learning to survive on intellect and anger. The system had labeled him unstable, gifted but volatile. All the while, he had carried one photo, a faded image of a smiling woman with a baby in her arms. He never knew that baby was his sister. When he finally discovered the truth years later, it broke something inside him. He tracked Luna down, not out of vengeance, but out of obsession with rewriting the story of his abandonment. When he saw her thriving, beautiful, loved, surrounded by privilege, his resentment curdled into delusion. In his mind, Luna had taken the life that should have been his. And when the crash happened, he saw it not as murder, but as restoration. He would save her, bring her into his world, and protect her from their father's poison. He would build a family the world had denied him. Now, as Dylan sat in a psychiatric facility under heavy supervision, he refused to speak to anyone but Luna. His lawyers, his doctors, even his priest, all turned away by the same words, "She's the only one who understands." The authorities begged Luna not to see him, but something in her, perhaps guilt, perhaps curiosity, compelled her to go. The day of their meeting, the sky hung low and gray, pressing against the windows of the institution like a warning. Dylan looked older, smaller somehow. The charisma that once masked his instability had burned away, leaving behind a haunted shell. When he saw her, his eyes softened with something almost pure. "You came," he whispered. Luna's throat tightened. She wanted to hate him, but hate required clarity, and nothing about this moment was clear. "You lied to me," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You took my life, my child's life, and twisted it into your story." Dylan smiled faintly, a fragile expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I gave you a life free from him," he said. "You don't know what he did. You don't know what he is." Luna stared at him, the name hanging unspoken between them. Bill Spencer, the man whose empire reached across media, fashion, and politics, was no stranger to manipulation, but the idea that Dylan's hatred for him had fueled such madness made her sick. "You think destroying me punished him?" she said. "You only became what you hated." For the first time, Dylan looked uncertain. "You don't understand," he murmured. "He's dangerous. You're his blood, and that means he'll use you, like he used everyone." Luna rose, trembling. "Then I'll face him myself." And she did. Bill agreed to meet her privately at Spencer Publications, behind locked doors and drawn blinds. When she entered his office, he looked nothing like the titan she had seen on magazine covers. His confidence had drained away, replaced by something heavier, shame, fear, and a kind of paternal grief he didn't know how to express. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I swear to you, Luna, I didn't know." Luna wanted to believe him, but part of her couldn't. His entire empire had been built on knowing everything, every secret, every lie, every angle. How could he not have known about her, about Dylan? Yet as she looked at him, she saw a flicker of sincerity, a man who had finally met something he couldn't buy or control. "What happens now?" she asked. Bill didn't have an answer. He wanted to make it right, to provide, to protect, to be the father he had never been. But Luna didn't want money or shelter. She wanted truth. And the truth was that Dylan had become what Bill might have been if power hadn't consumed him, a man desperate for control, shaped by abandonment, convinced that love was something you could own. In the weeks that followed, Luna tried to rebuild her life. She moved into a small apartment overlooking the city, away from the headlines, away from the chaos. She visited Dylan once more, this time to tell him she was forgiving him, not because he deserved it, but because she refused to let his darkness define her. Dylan cried then, real tears, silent and unguarded. "You're just like her," he whispered. "Like our mother." It was the first time he had spoken Clara's name since his arrest. Luna felt a surge of empathy she hadn't expected. For all his crimes, Dylan had been a child abandoned by both parents, a casualty of secrets that had spanned decades. Bill, meanwhile, tried to make amends in his own way. He funded a new psychiatric initiative in Dylan's name, a program designed to support trauma survivors and reform mental health care. The media hailed it as a gesture of redemption, but privately, Bill knew it was penance. He visited Dylan quietly, away from cameras, sitting across from the son he never knew he had. Dylan never called him father, but he didn't turn him away either. As for Luna, her path forward was uncertain. She continued therapy, returned slowly to her work, and devoted herself to raising her child, a daughter she named Clara, after the woman who had kept too many secrets but loved fiercely nonetheless. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Luna stood on her balcony, holding Clara close. The air carried the scent of salt and renewal. Somewhere in the distance, she imagined Dylan looking up at the same sky from his window, both of them tethered by blood and tragedy, but no longer by fear. She whispered softly to the wind, "We are not our past." And in that moment, for the first time since the crash, she believed it. But in a quiet corner of the psychiatric ward, Dylan sat at his desk, drawing again, lines, patterns, spirals that only he understood. At the center of every sketch was the same figure, a little girl with Clara's eyes. Beneath it, written in trembling ink, were the words, "She will finish what I started." No one noticed the letter he sent that night, addressed to Bill Spencer, postmarked from the ward. When Bill opened it days later, his hands shook as he read the single sentence inside, "You can't fix what you created." Outside, the city glittered as if nothing had changed. But for the Spencers, the Forresters, and the Nozawas, the illusion of peace was just another story waiting to collapse. The past had resurfaced, and its shadow was longer than anyone imagined.